the reason I wanted to do this is because I've been talking about masculinity. I think it goes along a lot with what I've talked about with Jung. I think when you think about the anima and the animus, that's all about, men finding their softer side sometimes, and females finding a tougher side, where they can be somewhat more resilient for females, where men can be somewhat more compassionate to other people. And, I think as you go along in life, that's just something that you need to kind of try to do. Because if you become a parent, you don't want to be the same person that you were with your friends in high school and things like that. Because I've gotten back onto YouTube, I've been like watching other YouTubers, trying to figure out like what is out there for men. And I realized like there are a lot of people trying to help men. But I also kind of realized that maybe there's a reason that like a lot of people find it hard to maybe resonate with me. I know I don't get as many comments as other people, even though I'm giving you guys really good advice. A lot of the times people tell me that I talk like not simple enough. So I do kind of get that. And I think I know why. And that kind of is going to go into a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. Um, because when I really think about it, like throughout my life, I've always done hard things. Like it was just natural for me to do the hardest thing that I could do. And it's what I encourage people to do. Um, However, I think the reason that I was able to do a lot of hard things and be successful in it was because of some factors outside of myself. I mean, there's definitely personality characteristics that allow me to continue doing that in my own life right now. And I do continue to do it. I still train. I train daily. I continue to learn. I try to improve my weaknesses continuously. Um, so I don't always sometimes I don't actually like recognize that like some of my struggles, or I just try to find a way to overcome them faster. And I do see a lot of men who talk about some of the problems that they have. And yeah, I don't necessarily have those. I still went through a lot of the struggle, but I think I came out on a good end of it. But I'm going to tell you why today, because I think it's a really important topic. Um, the idea of parenthood and how parents raise their children. It's a very critical factor in a person's development. Um, in my model for development, I often first try to figure out if somebody who was young was able to, when they were young, were they able to make their own decisions? Were they able to perceive the outer world and decide what they would like to do? Or were they forced into things based on their family traditions or the beliefs of their parents? Um, or even just the society that they live in. Like where I grew up, football was popular. So I was influenced to do football so by some of my peers, but I didn't necessarily like love football. It was just, people were saying, oh, you should do it. You should do it kind of thing. Um, but wrestling, I did choose. And wrestling is something that most people that I associated with, hung out with, or went to high school with weren't doing. It was my choice. And I think that's why that was probably one of the things that really had the biggest impact on me. Football was my choice, but it was my choice that was kind of influenced and just a way to fit in a way. Um, and this is going to get me to my point about like the importance of parenting is that, when I was playing football and wrestling and stuff, um, I was never forced into it. My dad had me play baseball at a young age, but after that, when I said I didn't like baseball, he never forced me into playing another sport. It wasn't until I decided, and I had the opportunity to look out and like I saw other people, other kids my age at the time, and what I realized is a lot of them had parents who forced them into football. They weren't good. They weren't starting. So it upset their parents afterwards that they weren't actually starting, but they were still doing it. And then their parents would push them to go harder and things like that. I personally never had that experience. If I asked my dad, like, hey, what could I have done better in practice? Because he came to every single practice, but he was the most quiet person at practice. He would explain to me, like, hey, you could have kept running before the referee blew the whistle, or you're not being aggressive enough in wrestling. But he would never be like the person to yell at me in front of people or anything like that, where I did see that actually happen to young men. And I could only imagine what they were feeling like when that kind of thing happened. And because I experienced those kinds of things, I kind of realized that a lot of guys were beat up, not like physically, well, possibly physically, but like what I'm explaining is like more verbally. They were like beat up by their parents to be better and improve on something that they probably didn't even choose for themselves. And it's very hard to do if you're in that situation. And then on the other end of that, there were fathers who weren't around, and that's a reality. And everybody knows, with if you have a father who's not around, it's very hard for their children to stay motivated. It's very hard for them to follow a track that will get them to the right place. And it's something that I should bring up a lot is because, I'm trying to be a really good dad. And I'm influenced by my dad, and I have to accept that some people didn't have that. And when I'm coaching people, that's usually the first thing I'm looking at is like, well, what did you grow up believing? Did you believe that you weren't good enough at something that you didn't even care about? Or did you grow up believing that no one cared about the things that you were interested in? Because it does go both ways, and there's other ways that this happens. So my main point is that like when we look at people, when we look at men and we consider masculinity, we really want to consider where did they come from? Where did they start? What experiences have they had that other people haven't had, both good and bad? And in my model, that's why I'm always pushing people to start from this solid foundation point, um, which most people, if they are living to the standards of their culture or their parental influence, they don't they might not actually have a foundation that they rely on and trust. That's just a reality. Because I can tell you, when I was improving through wrestling, the experience I had was significantly different than when I was improving through even just high school, which I didn't care about. Like I didn't care about it at all, but I would devote a lot of time to improving in wrestling. When something went bad, it affected me. I actually had this drive to think about it and improve myself. Where like if I got a bad grade in school, it wasn't necessarily that. With football, I was somewhere in the middle. Because I was a good wrestler, I was expected to be good at football. So I kind of maintained that standard. Um, but that's kind of how I try to work with people when I'm trying to coach them, because you really do want to like start looking at like what have people not experienced. And what I'm going to go over in a little bit is like some of the fundamental things that like, hey, if you didn't get the opportunity to do that when you were young, you should probably do that. Masculinity. I'm going to try to define it in a way. That's the one big thing. Defining masculinity as decently as I can tonight. Because I think that like there's some misconceptions. Like you can see people who think that someone like Andrew Tate is masculine. And I'll be honest, the dude is obviously like a masculine person, but I don't think he's a healthy masculine. I think he could be. I really, really do. Part of my model is about transitioning from what you were to what you could become. I think that that is what he is lacking. I don't think he is actually transitioning into a healthy role model that he could. I think he thinks he is, but I think that's a lot of what he experienced growing up. One thing is I've been watching a lot of videos and a lot of things are about saying no. Like men need to learn to say no. I definitely agree. I learned this at a young age. Um, I was never peer pressured to do anything. I did some bad things. Like I say bad, like bad by societal standards. Like I partied in my 20s, but I waited till my 20s. Like when my friends were asking me to smoke in my teens and stuff, I was easily able to say no. Even when they'd be like, come on, please do it, please do it, please do it. And I'd be like, no. When girlfriends wanted me to skip a wrestling practice or anything like that, I'd be like, no. And I carry all these with me. And I want to kind of teach you guys how to really work with this type of energy because it is good for you. And, you know, I think a lot of people take this a lot of young men take this and there they go, oh, they want to tell their girlfriends no so that they can go party with their guy friends. But I think the idea is to say no so that you can do things that are improving you. You know, if you're going out to the strip club or to the bars with your boys, it's a lot different, especially when you have a girlfriend or something like that, or a wife like I do. That's a lot different than, you know, telling them like, no, I'm not going to hang out with you because I'm going to improve myself at the gym or at a jujitsu class or something like that. So that's something that I did a lot. And I think it is really good to learn how to do it, but use it the right way, you know? Um, when you're dating somebody, you know, you don't want to just be like, no, I'm not hanging out with you because I'm going to hang out with a bunch of dudes. It's like, then why would she sit around and wait for you, kind of? And same thing, if you're the guy in that position, don't be scared to tell your wife or girlfriend, hey, I know I don't appreciate you going to the clubs or anything like that. You're allowed to do that. And that's something important to learn. Something that I do see is like the part of the toxic masculinity is like there are a lot of men who will see people who didn't get this foundation and then just judge them really quick. I really try to stay away from that unless I realize the person has a really bad personality because there is some of that. Sometimes they'll steal from you. They might be perverts. They might be something else, whatever. You know, keep your distance from that. Because it's really important to do. So in all of this, it does, you know, you're going to fail if you don't have discipline. It's the truth. And what I have learned about discipline is the more disciplined you are in the early stages, the less disciplined you get to be later on. If you do it the opposite way, you could be less disciplined and then you're going to be panicking. Just think about people who don't have a retirement fund because they didn't get disciplined enough to save that money. And then you have people who were very disciplined early and saved up for a retirement fund. So, you know, I know there's a lot of people who want to criticize discipline, but I mean, it's for yourself. You know, I'm not going to say like, let somebody else discipline you, but discipline yourself. It's probably critical to your development. So like when I think about like why I didn't have a lot of those problems is because I just kind of really early in my life realized, responsibility is important. That's what my dad gave me. So for clarification, let me explain this to you guys because it's kind of important. Like it's something that, if you have a hard time tempering your energy, your aggression, if you are like an overly like hyper masculine person, this may actually be good for you because it wasn't an environment for me. But my dad's business was a residential care home, and most of our patients were psych patients. They had schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, autism, anything on that spectrum. Um, and I had to spend, and I'm a thinker in the cognitive function way. So like, I remember I used to complain to my dad, like, why do we have to do this? And my dad, he said to me one day, he said, well, without these people, you wouldn't have a job. And if you don't have a job, then you don't have money. So I had to realize, like, taking care of people is a benefit to you as much as it's a benefit to them. And then, because I was doing that, I ended up talking to these people, and a lot of them were much older than me. And I would spend like a lot of time talking to them and just learning about them. And you kind of learn to have more empathy for people, not suicidal empathy, just empathy. Realize, and I think it's why I encourage you guys to do it because if you don't have a mental health disorder, a physical disability, you have so much opportunity. And I don't want to see people waste it because, these people weren't wasting it because they were doing the best they could. I had guys who had cancer and they were autistic and like their parents died. They had nobody and they would still try to show up to go to a work where they were making like $2 an hour because it's not a real job. And it's more like a volunteer thing that lets them get out. He would want to rake the grass clippings after I mowed and everything. And like this guy really suffered. And I'm not saying that like a lot, like some men don't suffer, but like if you don't have something like that, like you need to find a way to get yourself out there. And I think that being in that environment changed me a lot. Like, I think the reason that I can't settle on a type, honestly, the way a lot of people can, is because of that. Because I think that was counter to my natural development, honestly. Though I did learn to adapt to the environment. I have really good relationships with all the people who are still there, a lot of the residents. Though, as I said before, a lot of them did die over the past few years because they were old when I was starting working there, and now things have cycled through, and that does happen, unfortunately. But I do think it's a very important thing to try to like push yourself to do things that will allow you to get other people's to have an understanding of like other people's suffering because it may show you like you have it better than you think you do. And it's just a something to consider. I mean, I'm not saying that you definitely have it better than you think you do. I'm not. It's a possibility that you don't, honestly. But just consider it. Maybe go spend some time with some people who are really suffering, and maybe you'll see something different, and maybe you'll be motivated to make the world better for as many people as you can because you'll realize like that's not the life you want to live. We treat our residents really good. We try to give them Christmas parties, Easter parties, and things like that. Um, we give them out trips, like we take them to the park, take them bowling, to movies, and things like that. But um, if you can do more with your life, I just recommend trying to do it. Like I say all the time, if you reach out to me and you need somebody to like help walk you through it, like that was the thing. My dad helped me with that. Like that's why I don't have the struggle a lot of people did. When I was young, if there was a problem, I would tell him, hey, this is going on. And my dad, I think, um, I think he's kind of an ISFJ. I've said it. I'm pretty sure he is, because he takes on that parenting role like people I haven't seen. Like I couldn't take on the same parenting role he does, but I still have a lot of insight from things I've learned from him, kind of thing. So that's what I would try to do is help you guys in a similar way. Um, but a lot of it is going to be, developing those traits that will allow you to grow um, physically, psychologically, socially, being able to talk to people, which is something actually I think is important here. Um, well, yeah, let me actually talk about this. So, like, let me just give you an example of like things that like how my dad like helped me like embrace things that I wouldn't have. So when I was like, I think I was about 12 or 13, there was a bully in our school. I mean, I call him a bully because that's just the word we use. But basically, he wanted to fight me, and I wasn't a fighter. I really, I mean, I do jujitsu now, but I didn't want to fight. But it was pretty much like this kid was going to fight me, and I went to my dad. I said, "Someone wants to fight me. I'm going to get in trouble if it happens." That was probably the real reason I didn't want to fight because I didn't want to get suspended because I thought my dad would be mad. And my dad handled it very reasonably, in my opinion. He told me, "Hey, you know what? That's going to happen more than you think. And the thing is, if somebody wants to fight you, it's going to happen. That there's nothing you can do about it. You have to hit first, and you have to make sure it's done when you stop." And that was something he taught me. And I think, I probably, if I didn't if I didn't face that head on when he gave me that advice and when the kid came up to me in class and wanted to fight, honestly, I probably would have been more cowardly the rest of my life. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you know, I I did what my dad told me to do, and I was able to say, okay, well, I don't want to fight still. I still don't like fighting, but I didn't have to fight again. No one wanted to fight. After I beat the school bully, no one wants to fight you. So you have to be willing to stand up for yourself in everything you do. And I think I carry that with me continuously. I say things in rooms I shouldn't say them in. I know I do that. And I think it's very important to learn how to do that. And if you didn't have somebody who told you that, then that's what I'm telling you. And that's, you know, you got to look at your exact situation and I could help you with that, like kind of lead you through that. But like, you need to be willing to speak up for yourself. You need to be willing to protect yourself. It's very important for your own confidence. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up about like talking to somebody, having somebody to guide you through it. You know, people who let you know, like, you know, just because society says something is wrong to do doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. There is, you know, you need to be willing to protect yourself. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up was that I think overall, like there are stages to masculinity. It does start, you know, you may have to fight early on. And, you know, if you don't have those situations, you may go do jujitsu. Maybe you go train or something like that. But then, you know, you move through those stages. By the time I was in high school, someone wanted to fight me and I was able to de-escalate. You know, that was part of my training and working in healthcare, but also because I had matured and I wasn't somebody who just needed to fight. I could speak it out at that point. And then, you know, there's another stage to masculinity. Once you get through that, being able to talk to people and you're social with people and things like that, then you can kind of move into helping people. And when masculine people help others, it's obvious because they've put in the work beforehand. They've gone through the challenge, they've overcome it. Even if it was a struggle, they made sure they had the discipline, they took on responsibility, and now they're looking for more responsibility. And I really do think that's an important point of masculinity because, you know, we don't want people to still say all this stuff about toxic masculinity without looking at the fact that there is very healthy ways of being masculine. And you know, I'm in college now. I'm older than a lot of the kids, but I see a lot of them. Like, I have one kid. He doesn't call his. We have a female professor, and he was just like Miss. And I said, well, you know, she's gone through everything. You should probably be calling her professor, or she's a doctor. She's technically a doctor, but you know, something like that. And it's just learning respect for people. That's something that you should be able to do. And the teacher really likes me because she saw me actually call him out on that, and he fixed it. And there's things that, like, you know, he wasn't being a jerk or anything. He didn't know. He didn't realize it. And all I did was say, you know, if you were in the military, there would be a chain of command, and you would address people in a certain way. And it's the same thing here. You address people in a certain way. And I think, you know, when we're young, we're dumb. Like, we really are. We're not looking at that. We're not really looking at the social stuff. We're not thinking about like, oh, what is this person going to think if I say this? We don't even, like, wouldn't even want to think about that. It's basically just like, you know, we say what's on our mind. And sometimes people get offended. So, you know, when there are older people who have gone through the challenges, it would be nice for more of the older people to teach the younger people. And you know, I think that's probably a lot of the problem with people when, like, you know, when they don't have a good role model growing up. Unfortunately, that's why, you know, if you are somebody who's healthy and you've gone through the challenges, you should be somebody trying to help others and continue developing yourself because, you know, when you spread that and you teach young men how to be healthy masculines, they're going to spread that more, and that's going to create a better world because masculinity is a very important function in our world. It is what orders our world, and that's why I think, you know, part of the later development, like masculine men do understand the importance of order, like addressing somebody by the right name and things like that, by the right title, whatever it is. So that's just something that I would like you guys to think about if you could. You know, I think when I hear a lot of men about masculinity, a lot of it comes back down to females, like their engagement with females, that they are doing masculine things, but they have bad outcomes with females, or that they aren't being treated right. And I guess the one thing I could say is that part of your masculine development is probably going to require a lot of dating, and then, you know, kind of defining what you really want. I understand what people are saying when they say like there are not that many great females to date out there. There's also not that many great males to date for them. So like the idea is if you are great, there somebody is out there for you. And I had a lot of bad relationships, like really bad. Um, and then I found my wife, and I knew right away that she wasn't like those other girls. And I knew I had to prove that I could be the man that was going to be a good supporter and a good father, and that was important that I did that. A lot of that is actually just having fun with the girl that you decide to date. Like I said, I see a lot of guys, they they blow off their girlfriends to go hang out with their guy friends. It's like, no, if you really want to marry someone, then that should be the person that you are trying to be with. Just in my opinion, like, yeah, you can go hang out with other people, but if if you have a date night, that's what you should be trying to do. Not, and like I said, you should learn how to say no to your friends. That's important. You know, your friends aren't going. I have a lot of friends, but we don't see each other that much. Once you kind of start really living your life, you're not going to see your friends that much. I see my wife every day. We wake up together. After this, I'm going to go have a little bit of wine with her. So it's important that she's the person I committed to, and we've been together now. I think I hope she doesn't watch this. I think it's 13 years. Um, and that's we started when we were young. I stopped going out with not going out with my boys, but like going out to the clubs and things like that, or to the bars when I started dating her, and we started having more fun. And I think that's something that's how you build your life. If you find a good girl, like you got to start building your life with her as fast as you can, because like we've all addressed, like there aren't that many out there. Um, and you know, a lot of people come around when they're older, but I personally think you're better off finding your person early. There's a lot of reasons. Um, but that's just something that I would suggest to anybody who is really interested in like trying to find a girlfriend. Like you need to be the person who leads. And I even in your relationship, I've been telling a lot of my friends, because I've seen a few of my friends actually struggling in their relationships, and I do tell them like you're struggling because you aren't leading. And it is the truth. Like when you're like your wife does want you to lead. If you are not leading, she will try to lead, and you aren't going to like that. It's just a fact. Um, because you will realize that there's a role that you aren't playing that you probably really do want to fulfill. So you know, and even my wife, like me and her have had this conversation where like, you know, when I got burnt out a little bit, she didn't like it so much, but like I said, like I picked myself up once I realized like, oh yeah, I can't do this. And when I started leading, she didn't realize it. So I kind of talked to her like, hey, I'm going to lead this family again. Like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get back on track. We opened her a business. I did tell her like, you know, and I think this is important. If you have a wife, build her up. Like, make sure she can be self-sufficient. I told her before we got married, I said, um, you need to be self-sufficient. We're going to open you a business. It will be your business. I will help you open it. We will get it open. And she was petrified at first. She had already built a good career as a as a hairstylist, and that's what we did. We built her a business, and it made our lives a lot more enjoyable. She's not, you know, I think just having a business makes you more free. She got to set her own schedule now. She doesn't have an employer telling her what to do, and you know, it doesn't emasculate me any bit because she has a business that she runs and employees that she who rent from her basically. They're renters who rent chairs, but that she's making good money. It's a really good thing. It's good for our family. Um, and you know, if you're a man and you want your wife to do that, you need to kind of understand what steps she needs to take. Because the fact is, most people don't know how to start a business. It is kind of upsetting because that was the American dream at one time, but the fact is, like, you can learn. You can start young, do it with something small, and then keep growing your way up. It's a really important thing to do. But then, like now, masculinity also has another layer to it, which is something that I just really think is important. Is that you need to be a man of the times. And I know a lot of people like look at the AI and all the other technology, but it really is important. Like you don't have to like invest a bunch of money into it. You don't need to make it your career or anything like that. But it is very important that, you know, you have an understanding of what is going around you in the world for real. Um, because how can you lead if you don't? That's one of my biggest points here is like, you know, with the technology idea, like in order to lead your family, or lead a company, or um, even help your kids, like you and your kids go to school, they're going to be using technology. Even to watch your kids these days, you need to understand how can they use the technology? How can you put settings on it so that they aren't seeing the nasty things that are online? I'm going to be honest, if you're a dad, just understand, if you have your kids on a tablet, they might be playing a kid's game, but some adult stuff might be getting advertised on there, and some of it's really disgusting. So just understand, like, you should understand how to navigate the technology. Um, it's part of protecting your family, which comes down to probably one of my last real points here that I kind of came up with. I kind of wrote all this out. I was like kind of essay-ish, but not really an essay, more like bullet points. And it really just came down to that real masculinity is not just the ability to protect yourself, it's the ability and willingness to use your strength in service of others. And what that means is a lot of different things. But the biggest thing I would say is that strength without service becomes dominance, ego, or intimidation. And you will see that in the early stages of masculinity. But as men begin to develop, they start to realize that domination isn't the one thing that you need, you know, because you need to be able to help people. You need to be able to build teams, build coherence, and um, that's really what it comes down to. Um, and that's something you see in the later stages. But it takes a lot of interacting with people, a lot of failing on your own, a lot of getting into other people's perspectives and understanding, where do people suffer and where can you help them? Like, and a lot of times it's just like if you've done something or you've been in that position, you can give the advice. If not, you're probably giving bad advice, like when you see young kids telling their friend, oh, just leave that girl or something like that, or girls telling their girlfriends, oh, just leave that guy. And it's probably like a really dumb decision. That's probably one of the few people that are good for you. And they're telling them to do those kind of things because they don't have the experience. Also, they may not care about their friend as much as they say they do, or things like that. You see that a lot. Um, but basically, the idea is learn how to use your strengths to help people, and understand that masculinity is not proven by how many people you can overpower. It is proven by how many people are safer, stronger, or better because you were there.